start the screencast. Sorry, that happens sometimes. I'm gonna have to make a couple of attempts. Okay, hi everybody. I hope you all can see my screen. It'll be coming up in a second.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, and remember, everybody please mute your microphones.
Okay.
Really gonna help us. Okay, great. So we're gonna get started with myths of the unemployment rate. And as I said, please use the chat feature. I'll do my best as we go along. Questions as they appear and as I can. And we're just gonna get started. This is the first from Research and Planning in a series, hopefully a series of webinars talking about some of the information that we have overwhelming to people who didn't make the website. And that can be really overwhelming. So hopefully a series of webinars talking about some of the extra things that we can offer and answering common questions. The most common question that we are ever asked in planning is, if the economy is so bad, why is the unemployment rate so low? And it's frustrating for everyone involved when what we perceive does not line up with the data that we're hearing on the news. And so hopefully explaining a little bit about the unemployment rate will help people understand why there seems to be a disconnect. We're going to try and answer the questions today. What is the unemployment rate? Why doesn't it represent Wyoming's economy? And what other ways can we use to measure Wyoming's economy? First, I'd like to introduce myself, though. My name is Caitlin Failer. I'm a senior economist at Research and Planning. I've been here 4 years. I studied economics and geology in England because I couldn't make up my mind what I wanted to do. I'm curious about everything. And I love making complicated data more easily accessible. And again, if everybody could please mute their microphones, that would be really helpful. Thank you. And we are an exclusively statistical agency. That means that we don't run any programs out of our office. And that means that we can kind of create, that means that we can have a more of a third eye perspective when evaluating other programs. Our funding isn't tied to how well something is doing. We're not emotionally invested in helping certain people and having certain outcomes. We think that's a really good thing. To do our labor market analysis, we use surveys and administrative data. You've probably gotten lots of surveys from our office in the past, and administrative data is what people collect when they run programs, and then we use that data and aggregate it and try and make really powerful tools to help people make better decisions. Public, the legislature, media, businesses, other government entities. And whatever you need, I will definitely try and help get whatever that is to help you make the best decision for you. And we're gonna play a game. It's called a Kahoot. Some of your kids may have done this in school. It's a lot of fun. Phone or another browser and go to kahoot.it. So kahoot.it, to enter the game pin, and as I switch screens, you'll see that here in a minute. So kahoot.it. Your smartphone, you can also open a small browser window. Kahoot.it again. And here is the game pin. The game pin is 822278. You'll need to enter the game pin at kahoot.it. And I'm starting to see names here. That's really awesome. Good. I'm glad this is working. This is going to be fun. This is going to be really fun playing for my cave in the middle of Wyoming, my cave office. Okay, cool. Great. Me, Jeff, Mary, Kate, Radian, great. Again, kahoot.it with the game pin 82278. One more minute to get on board. You don't need to use your real name if this is not your thing. I'll type the game pin and the website into our chat. Two 278. Sorry, Robert. I'm not sure why that's happening. Robert, I hope you're tuned in on, if possible, on the webinar itself and not just on the phone. We have a sizable number of people. We're going to get started. I'm excited. There's going to be 5 questions. You'll have a moment to read the question and then 30 seconds to answer. The first question is the percentage of what? It could be the red triangle, employed people over population, and unemployed people divided by civilian labor force. Yellow circle, unemployed people plus employed people divided by the population. 5 seconds. Great job. 10 right on blue diamond. Unemployed people divided by civilian labor force. The other, the red triangle, employed people divided by population, that is the employment to population ratio. Is the labor force participation rate. So who's first? Mary, nice job. You're winning. In November 2017, the seasonally adjusted unemployment rate for Wyoming and the US was blue triangle, 4.9 and 4.6% for the US. The blue diamond, 2.9% or 4.7% for the US. Yellow circle, 6.1% for Wyoming, 9.8% for the United States. Or the green where 4.3% for Wyoming's unemployment for the United States. Great job. Yes. And these are.
We've had a problem. They want us to use a browser that hasn't cleared DOL security, so I tried to pull it up on.
Sorry, just a minute. I'm sorry. That's right. Okay, so these rates, these pairs of unemployment rates are all from Wyoming are all from November's in the last 10 years. So the most recent statewide Wyoming unemployment rate is 4.3%, and that was for Wyoming. That's the most recent information. 6.1 and 9.8%, that pair was from November 2010. 0.9 and 4.6, that's from November 2016, so the year before the most recent data that's available. And then 2.9% for Wyoming's unemployment rate, 4.7% for November 2007, right before the Great Recession. Minnie's in the lead now, that's great. All right, you cannot be counted as officially unemployed if you were fired from your job, are a student who is also looking for work, didn't apply for unemployment insurance benefits, or none of these. Almost there. Can we get anybody else to answer? 5 seconds. Correct answer, none of these. And this is hard because we think, oh, you know, I didn't qualify for unemployment insurance benefits, or I didn't bother applying, I was too busy. But the unemployment rate is calculated using estimates from a phone survey. The statewide seasonally adjusted unemployment rate is conducted through a survey. And it's anybody who is in that household who was contacted for the survey who's over 16. If you are looking for work, you can be officially unemployed. Fabian, great job. You are in the lead, closely followed by Christopher, then Kit. This is our fourth question. The unemployment rate is artificially low. It doesn't count people who ran out of benefits. True or false? Just a couple more people to answer, I think. 10 seconds. It's artificially low. It doesn't count people who ran out of benefits. True or false? Oh, the correct answer is false. And this is a huge misconception about the unemployment rate. Again, the unemployment rate is conducted is a survey. And if your household is contacted in the survey, and then they extrapolate from there, but if your household is contacted in the survey that, okay, you ran out of benefits or you never even applied for benefits, but you're still looking for a job, then you can still be officially unemployed. Question. Job creation always causes the unemployment rate to decrease. Looking for a few more answers, 15 seconds. Always causes the unemployment rate to decrease. True or false? Right, so most people got this one right. And this is also a tricky question because, okay, well, how can we get the unemployment rate to go down? We think, well, we need more job creation, and that's true. Usually more jobs indicate less unemployed people. And rate can wobble a lot, especially during times of economic recoveries. Looking at the unemployment, if you're only looking at the rate every month, then you're missing an awful lot. Jobs are hard to come by. Women who generally earn less than men anyway may not find it worth their time to take an even lower wage job after being laid off. It worth their time to look for a job and instead, do unpaid work as caregivers if they had to take their kids out of daycare anyway. Remember, in order to be counted as unemployed, you have to be looking for a job, but these people aren't even part of the labor force anymore. So, but maybe during an economic recovery, someone could say, like, they could hear the job market's getting better, jobs are being created, yeah, I want to re-enter the job market, I want to do paid work, I'm part of the labor market and I'm unemployed. And this is where the unemployment rate wobbles a lot. It's where it's important to understand that the unemployment rate may not be always the best way to measure the economy, especially during recessions and recoveries. It's a really important indicator and it has a long history, but is it the final say? Definitely not. So Christopher, Fabian, and Tiffany, congratulations, you guys rock. Now back to our presentation. Let's address our first question, the unemployment rate. Well, the unemployment rate is the estimated number of unemployed people divided by the civilian institutionalized labor force. And the unemployment rate is conducted, the survey to estimate the unemployment rate is done by the Census Bureau. And it tries to address the reasons behind a person's labor market participation. It can address the reasons behind why someone might hold multiple part-time jobs, if they haven't looked for a job in over a year, and it can help collect the data on whether or not someone is expecting to lose their job soon. So what does it mean to be unemployed? Well, you have to have you have to meet these three criteria. You don't have a job, you want a job, and you are available to work. That means that you can't have a disability or an illness preventing you from work, or a caregiving obligation that would keep you from taking a job if you want to work. And you also have to be looking for jobs in the past month. So what does it mean to be part of the labor force? It means all of these things. First of all, you have to be 16 and over. And not that people under 16 don't work, but just that they aren't counted as part of the labor force. You want to work. So you need to be employed or looking for a job and want to be employed. And finally, as part of the civilian non-institutionalized labor force, or in the military, because that's the rules if you want to be part of the civilian non-institutionalized labor force. After all the data is collected by the current population survey nationwide, the Bureau of Labor Statistics breaks it down by state, but not by county. That's an entirely different process. The data is adjusted to account for things like weather, school schedules, and harvests. For example, many people work retail during the holidays and then are laid off in January, or teachers aren't working during the summer, but they aren't looking for a job either. Construction and in the summer, and then get laid off in the fall. And seasonal adjustment helps us understand whether or not changes in the labor force are expected, regular, normal, or if they signify something much deeper. Why doesn't the unemployment rate represent Wyoming's economy? Now of the unemployment rate, but why doesn't it match what we see? Well, first of all, the unemployment rate is seasonally adjusted and it's statewide for Wyoming. And personally, I don't have a pair of Google glasses that help me look at a line of people waiting for unemployment insurance benefits and then seasonally adjust them. I don't think they've invented that yet. That would be cool. But it's just not the same as the statewide unemployment insurance rate is not the same as what we're seeing in our small towns and our communities. So, for example, in November 2017, the statewide seasonally adjusted unemployment rate for Wyoming was 4.3%. Now, remember, counties are calculated differently, and counties are not listed, and that makes them an entirely different animal. For example, Teton County in November 2017, an unemployment rate of 6.1%. What's going on there? Is there a bust? Like, what's happening? Do we need to extend unemployment insurance benefits for all those people there? No. November 2017, it's shoulder season in Teton County. There's no Yellowstone and there's no skiing yet. And it's a tough time in fall and spring for people in Teton County. Now, Teton County had the highest county, not seasonally adjusted county unemployment rate in Wyoming. And the lowest was over in Niobrara County, percent unemployment. What's going on here? Is there a boom? Do we need to send more people? How are we going to attract enough people to take care of this workforce? Is any of that true? No, not really. What's going on in Niobrara County is a lot of aging. Niobrara County is one of the older counties in Wyoming. Ages around 46.1 at the last census, and that's about 10 years older than the rest of the state average, state's median age. So many people who live in Niobrara County, maybe they don't want a job because they're retired. Lucky them. It's really important to remember that sorry about that. In line here. It's really important to remember about the statewide seasonally adjusted unemployment rate is that it's an average. Numbers mean nothing without context. It's hard to imagine things differently for the rest of the state when all you can see is your own community, and that's okay. 0.3% is a made-up number, that it's just junk. No, but it probably means that it's not counting the same thing that you are seeing. So understanding the shortcomings of the unemployment rate is important. You're only officially unemployed if you don't have a job, you want a job, and you're available for work, and you're looking for a job. And this definition does not, in the least, cover what we know about our friends and our family and our neighbors. You're technically unemployed. You're technically not unemployed. You're still employed or you're not part of the labor force if, for example, but your company's only letting you work a certain number of hours. If you know, like Santa, you're going to lose your job next month, you're still employed. You're not counted as unemployed, even though your job isn't stable. For work because you feel you don't have the right training. Or if you work full time, but you don't use your full skill set and you're underpaid, but have unpaid obligations such as caretaking, then you're not even available for work. You're not even in the workforce. Or if you can't find work because you have a disability. All of these things that we see in our everyday lives, they're not counted in the unemployment rate that we see. The other things the unemployment rate does not measure, and these are so numerous, we're going to use some pictures. They don't measure job creation, wage changes, changes in state population, the number of hours worked, changes in the labor force, Wyoming's dependence on non-resident labor. It doesn't factor in the price of oil, the rig count, sales and use tax, home buying and building permit application, tourism numbers, school enrollment, regular ups and downs between summer and winter for counties. This is Super Bowls, playoff games, any sort of unusual boom doesn't count for that. So if there are all these shortcomings to Wyoming's unemployment rate, what other ways can we use to measure Wyoming's economy? It's tempting for many people to only use the unemployment rate. It has a long history. It's a regular, reliable number. It's the most talked about economic indicator. But judging an entire economy by the unemployment rate is like trying to judge how well someone is doing by their car. And you can indication if someone's, driving a Porsche or a Ferrari or a Tesla, You don't necessarily know all of the details and the nitty-gritty that went into getting that. Like, does that person still scrub their own toilets? Like, that person pick up their dog's poop? You know, did they take a really high interest rate and to get this? Do they have a really small house? Do they never travel? Like, do they have the same values in what they want in their life as, you know, you or I would want? All of those things go into different ways that we can measure Wyoming's economy. We just talked about a whole bunch of them, but we're going to try and talk about 3 other economic indicators that have a lot of objectivity. And we're going to talk about the underemployment rate, or U6, participation rate, and the employment population ratio. The underemployment rate, or U6, is a broader measure of the statewide seasonally adjusted unemployment rate, which is typically known as U3. Participation rate, as we learned from our game, takes the number of people in the labor force being the number of employed people and unemployed people, the working age population. It's a percentage. The employment population ratio is also a percentage. It takes the number of people who are employed and then divides that by the working age population. Numbers can be hard to find, and they are linked at the end of the presentation, and I will definitely link them all. Follow-up notes in email. First, we'll talk about underemployment in Wyoming. It's not technically called underemployment, but I do think it's a good way to describe it, especially for this presentation. It's technically called the U6, and it counts people who are unemployed and workers who want to be full-time, and workers who have been discouraged by their job search and maybe looked in the past year, but have not looked in the past month. In Wyoming, the unemployment average for October 2016 to September 2017 was 4.4%, and the underemployment average for the same time period, it's a one-year average that ended in September 2017, was 8.6%. Reflects a lot of what we see in our communities that we're not seeing when people report on, our office and people report on the unemployment rate, which in November was 4.3% for the state of Wyoming. The downside to the underemployment rate, updated on a only once a quarter, and on a 1-quarter lag. And it's given a 1-year average for state. There are big drawbacks to using this number, but I do think that perception-wise, this number describes more of what we see. So in Wyoming, the labor force participation rate for November 2017, the most recent data, was 65.1%. It's actually quite a bit higher than the national average. More people than about that 500,000 people in the state. But remember, we're only counting the working age population, so people over 16, we're not counting children. There is not child labor, but they're not counted. So the labor force for Wyoming was almost 293,000. You divide those numbers, you get 65.1% participation rate. If we just take the number of employed people divided by the working age population, we get 62.3% employment to population ratio. For the United States, in November 2017, the employment population ratio was 60.1, or 60.1%. These numbers mean, as I said before, absolutely nothing without context. What about Colorado? And really, what about Idaho? Wyoming is not an island. It has a very mobile workforce. In certain areas and boom times, up to a third of Wyoming's population can be who don't have driver's licenses in Wyoming. Obviously, people who don't plan on settling here or are unsure about it. The Census Bureau recently released this graphic about Idaho being fastest growing state, and that's pretty good for them. It was greater than 2%. They had 9% growth between July 2016 and July 2017. Idaho was the fastest growing state in the union, and Wyoming was one of a few states who lost population in this time period. But what's really important to understand is that all our neighbors grew in population between 2016 and 2017. When we talk about the other labor force indicators, the labor force participation rate, employment to population ratio, the underemployment rate, it's important to put some context with this. Like, okay, Wyoming's underemployment rate is 8.6% of all. And, you know, each region has its own maybe normal, and that's why it's important to look at our border states. So Wyoming's for the past year average was 8.6%. Contrast that with Colorado's quote underemployment rate, 6.2%. That's a big difference. And Nebraska, 6.3%. In terms of who's getting the most hours to work or who is working full time, and lots of other indicators like that. It's important to compare with other states in the nation, the labor force participation rate. If you look at this graph over time since 2000, but this graph only shows since 2005, you can see a gentle slope downward in the labor force participation rate. The consensus is that this is largely driven by an aging population. In 2000, when the labor force participation rate peaked, that is when many baby boomers started retiring for the first time. So we can compare the United States in purple to Wyoming in green. And you're going to notice around 2010, a big sharp drop. That was a big adjustment, I believe, in how the census was counting people in rural Wyoming. Wyoming being a very small state, small changes in population can have a big effect on the estimate. So it's important as you look at Wyoming in your mind's eye to kind of smooth that out a little bit, but also recognize that there was a big drop in the labor force participation rate about that time. As the national recession was ending, Wyoming was and starting to recover nationally. Wyoming was facing the bottom of its recession almost about a year after the nation. So there definitely was a huge drop there. And it's try and smooth that out in your mind's eye and still recognize that Wyoming has a relatively high labor force participation rate. I attribute a lot of that to a lot of non-resident workers and people who come from out of state to Wyoming to work. Wyoming, they work for a while and families later. For context, let's throw in Colorado in blue, Idaho in red. The employment population ratio, which measures the number of people who are employed divided by estimate of the number of total working age people. Nationally, we can see a big drop Great Recession between 2007 and 2009. And we've never gotten all the way back up to that population percentage. Not that there aren't more people working, but that the percentage is different. And that, again, has so much to do with demographics and aging nation. And if we look at Wyoming, again, we're higher. Notice the bump in 2010. Make that adjustment in your mind's eye. We have an aging population. We have a mobile workforce. And still, we have a higher employment to population ratio than in many, many other states. In the comparison of Colorado and Idaho. And think about how more people might want to work in Colorado, especially maybe a single income is not enough. The cost of living in Colorado, when I visit, seems to be, and maybe many more people do need to work to support a family there. And then also look at the red line, Idaho, and growth in Idaho and how that has affected the employment. None of these things, and looking at one of these numbers is never enough. You have to have context to have a thing. So we've just about come to the end of our presentation. So let's review. What is the unemployment rate? It's the estimation of the number of unemployed people divided by the labor force. Counties are measured differently, we reviewed, and they are not seasonally adjusted. It's not really reasonable to compare what's happening in November in Teton County with 6.1%, Niobrara County in the same time at 2.3%. They have different economies, different demographics. They're not seasonally adjusted to understand that. And why doesn't represent Wyoming's economy? Well, the unemployment rate is an average and it's seasonally adjusted. I don't have Google glasses to seasonally adjust for me what I'm looking at without context. The unemployment rate requires context, and the unemployment rate does not account for how mobile Wyoming's workforce is, and there are a lot of things that are important to Wyoming. We talked about other measures that we can use in the economy, the underemployment rate, the labor force participation rate, and the employment to population ratio. But mostly it's important to remember in the context of all of this that Wyoming is not an island, and that is extremely important. We have a mobile workforce, we have a mobile economy. Wyoming is not an island. So now I'd like to open it up for questions. You can go ahead and use your microphone, or you can type in the chat box, but I'm happy to answer anything, even if it's possibly unrelated. If you have a story or an anecdote you'd like to share with the group about what you'd observed, I'd love to hear it. Okay, anyone? Fabian just asked, how are remote workers living in Wyoming for an working in another organization, how are they counted? I'll have to double check on that. I think that they are counted as part of our, if they are living here and you're counted in the phone survey, then I will double check with everybody, but I believe that, you know, you're still employed, counted as part of the unemployment rate, and you are working. So I will need to double check on that because, yeah, a lot of people do that. And to you, Fabian. Questions? Okay, well then I'd like, I know you guys can't click through and see my sources here, but I will link to the presentation so that you guys can all click through these and find, difficult to find information. Oh, Deanna Crofts just asked how to obtain the telephone numbers that you survey. I don't know. The survey for the current population survey, if that's what you're talking about, that's done through the Census Bureau. Is definitely not my department. Does that answer your question, Deanna? How to obtain the phone numbers that we survey? Because our office doesn't conduct the current population survey. We do, we just gather the data afterwards. Robert asked, any thoughts on the large labor force decline in Campbell County over the past 3 years? I do have a thought on that. I have noticed, and this is just in some graphs that I've done, and I would have to go and look at this a little deeper to really dig into this, but I have noticed that after in Campbell County, every time in the quarterly census of employment and wages, every quarter that I saw a huge dip in Campbell County, I saw a rise in other counties, especially Laramie County around Cheyenne. I would guess those are related. I don't have any causational evidence to show you that, oh yeah, former Campbell County workers are now moving to Cheyenne, but those two things, I did notice a correlation. There might be something there. It's really something interesting to look into. I feel Campbell County's really had it rough. Okay, well, I will stay on a bit longer. If anybody else wants to continue this conversation, I'm happy to hang out. Otherwise, if you think of something else that you'd like to ask me personally or outside of the group setting, email me or call me. My phone number and my email are on the screen. Okay, I'm going to hang out. I'm going to mute my microphone, but I will continue to observe the chat should anybody get brave enough to ask another question. Thanks so much, you guys. I really appreciate you tuning in. If you have thoughts about our next or other common questions you'd like us to answer, email me and we'll talk. Great. Thanks so much. Brenda Reedy, you just asked how can we use this information to help with, and I'm not sure, I guess I don't have a great answer to how to use this particular information when filling positions. Important to understand the difference between the differences in what the unemployment rate is telling us versus like how we can apply this. Like the unemployment rate is a measurement, and right now it's kind of low. And you know what? It's even lower in Colorado, and I still know personally, anecdotally, lots of people are having trouble finding jobs. And just because the unemployment rate is low, anybody can just walk in and get a job. It could mean there's a huge amount of competition. People are driving for Uber, and you know they're not really counting that as like, oh, I'm employed, I'm driving for time for Uber. That like there's just a big difference between what the unemployment rate counts, how we can use this information in filling positions. Specific trouble and you'd like more information to talk with you about, Brenda, email me, call me, exactly what the question is you're trying to answer. Raul asked, how long does it take for the unemployment numbers to change when people move away or move to the state for jobs? And that should be about, I mean, it's about a month. Like, so the November numbers are out and the December numbers are going to come out next week for statewide. So I would say we're on about a 1 month lag for the statewide seasonally adjusted unemployment rate. Okay, guys, I think that about does it. So we have phone. I don't know your name. And Elise and Kelsey. Are there questions I can answer for you all? I am still here if there are questions from the phone number ending in 77 or from Kelsey.